Rick and Morty comic, The Rick Identity. We start out seeing Beth at a candlelight dinner with Jerry, saying that she doesn't know what it is, but the last few months he's changed, being attentive and connecting again with her, and he even feels different, like a new man. I think I remember this. I also remember that in all the issues in this book before this, Beth and Jerry had exactly as bad of a marriage as in the show. So this came out of nowhere. I expected to know that it's been a few months since the previous issue, where every character was acting like they're supposed to. Beth wants to recommit to him, but then Jerry sweats being scared and runs away. He goes up to Rick, dragging Morty along, asking what Rick's done. He says that Rick did something because he was having a romantic dinner with his wife and suddenly realized he was about to be with his own mother. Why would he realize that at all if he was thinking she was his wife in the first place? That's a big question. What took so long? He tells him to undo whatever he did, and Rick reveals that he might have switched their minds and left them there. This is what I was talking about in that issue where Summer and Jerry switched bodies. In that story, they were able to get back to their bodies with no effort on anybody's part. Literally all that happened was Rick and Morty returned to the spaceship and suddenly Jerry and Summer teleported to them back in their own bodies. And they switched bodies because Jerry pressed a button on the spaceship. Also, in the show, we saw that Rick is able to transfer his consciousness to a different body, which he did multiple times to escape a prison and sabotage the Council of Ricks. Not to mention he can do this to survive death and wake up in a clone body. So with all this in mind, it's absolutely impossible to believe that he would be incapable of returning Morty and Jerry to their original bodies when he made a body switching button and he can transfer his consciousness just fine. So the only logical explanation is that no, there aren't basic incompatibilities that make switching them back dangerous. That's total bullshit. This is the kind of nonsense that happens when all the writers of a comic don't read the stories, not buy them. You get a serious continuity error. Rick is lying, and he is capable of returning them to normal. He would be really embarrassed of being unable to achieve something. He'd work hard so that he could. He insisted in the show that he can make anything. The only way they'd stay in each other's bodies so long is if Rick wanted them to, and I can't imagine why. The story wouldn't feel so terrible if it was explained right away that all he's doing is pulling a practical joke on them. Basically, he invented a machine that made Morty and Jerry forget they had switched bodies by switching their memories. He says that he actually came up with a fix a while ago, but bringing it up would have had them mad at him for switching their minds without asking. I was wondering if he just used that same machine again when he used the machine to fix things. After all, he just said there were basic incompatibilities. And then Rick acts suspicious when Morty asks how he's supposed to know it worked. And he calls Morty Summer. Summer says, "Aw, man." But then the next page, he talks as if he hasn't figured it all out for sure from that. Instead he says that he doesn't know what's wrong because every time he looks in the mirror it feels wrong. Like he was supposed to be a girl. He hugs a lab coat that's being supportive of whatever he decide, and then it turns out he was hugging a big mannequin with flippers that was wearing a lab coat. Rick starts lampshading how he was stupid enough to think that was him since that thing is so fat. If the writer knows that was too stupid of him, he shouldn't have written it. But it was funny how long he went on about how stupid he was. Rick tells him to kill this thing already, wanting to assassinate the Star Queen of Aphaxia. Then all of a sudden the queen, that looks nothing like a girl, tells Morty that he's lying. I guess it makes sense that Morty believes him right away. I really don't understand why Rick switched Summer and Morty. It's just a giant villain bull for him that always stood out to me as something even the show's Rick would never do. Morty points a gun at him and says that thanks to his mind switch array, anybody could be anybody. In this kind of situation, it's exactly why Rick shouldn't have made this ray. Is he not confident enough to think he can achieve something without switching bodies with someone? I'm just wondering why Rick didn't erase Morty's memory of spending 6 months with his own dad. And erase Jerry's memory, because in the show, he was constantly erasing Morty's memories. and making him relive them was the whole point of Morty's mind blowers. So if Rick has that kind of technology, there's no reason Morty would remember being Jerry. So this whole plot wouldn't have happened. Also, I know this is Summer and Morty's body right now, but fuck it. I'm gonna inevitably call the person by what they look like anyways, so I might as well be consistent. You know who it really is. The manatee's talking nothing like Rick, being nothing but nice, while Rick's body's always been talking like Rick. And I couldn't imagine Rick being that consistently nice just to pretend he's someone else. He shoots Rick indeed, but the laser goes right through him, and Rick is just fine. I guess it only went through a hologram? Then Rick reveals that you have to turn off the safety to use the ray gun, and so the laser is harmless otherwise. Wouldn't it make a lot more sense if there was no laser at all if the safety was on? Rick blasts the manatee, and it says that if he keeps this up, he'll leave him in that body permanently. Morty's upset at the idea that he's still Summer, after that ridiculous kick the dog moment. And I'm guessing he's just that good of a person and only shot Rick on a confused whim, because the safety's off by now and Rick just threw him a ray gun, while threatening him. He must have a lot of faith in Summer's morality to assume she won't shoot him right now. This comes off like it's written by someone who has never watched an episode of the show in their lives, and takes Rick being evil sometimes way too seriously, and therefore thinks that Rick is just a complete monster, and so it would make perfect sense for him to be doing this. Then we see Summer in Morty's body aiming a ray gun at Morty in bed, saying to come with him and set things right. Again, I'm just gonna call it how I see it, you know what I really mean. Summer asks Rick what he did as she's tied to him, and Rick says the bullshit lie that he switched everyone's minds and never figured out how to switch everyone back. Bullshit. Rick says that all he did was make everybody happy again. Rick keeps calling Summer Morty regardless. Almost like he didn't switch their minds and actually just change their memories. And so, he's right. Rick says that all we are is emergent memory systems and wave patterns. And all he did was delete a bunch of data to make Summer Morty. At least this is memorable, but it's such a jarring, silly story. Rick actually needs to remind Summer that shooting him won't matter because he just wake up in a clone body. He says he has a bunch of backup clones, while the Rick from the show doesn't have any in his own universe, so we know this is comic Rick right away. Rick tells him that identity is an illusion, as Summer says that all he is data, and it doesn't matter who's using that data. Then Morty gets hit in the face by yellow light and knocked out, and the ray gun gets picked up by Rick. It turns out these are all clone Ricks that Rick wants to get back in the nutrient sludge baths. It would actually make more sense if, rather than turning on Rick for no reason at all, they were just programmed to pull a joke on them. One of the Ricks blasts Comic Rick apart for no explained reason. And like, it could still be a prank if he did wake up in a clone body after this. And all the clones are conscious, so there's no way he'd wake up as one of them. But the show established that even if there's no clone Ricks in his own universe, somehow he teleports to another universe and wake up in the clone of that Rick. So Comic Rick isn't really dead. In the show, even after that happened, Rick still ended up getting back to his universe, so Comic Rick would inevitably do the same thing. So what's the point of this? One of the clones says that he doesn't know why they're upset since they're all Grandpa Rick. See right here, when I remember this is why I was tempted to call it a practical joke. Because they're smiling at this point. It's either I call it a prank, or I call it ridiculously bad character derailment. This doesn't even feel like the same character as Rick. Summer in Morty's body backs away from them holding a baseball bat and tells his family to get away from him as Rick smirks and the rest of them stare into space instead of at him. As if the clone Ricks who for no reason at all switch bodies with them when they like themselves, not someone else's identity. Are they just trying to freak him out on purpose? I don't get it. This is suicidally incompetent of Rick. This is the easiest way to... If there was one thing that's guaranteed to turn Morty on him for real, this would be it. And this is Summer in Morty's body. I don't even know where Morty is because the Summer body is trying to creep him out. And if Rick really wanted Morty to let it go, he'd erase his memory. This kind of thing is prime Morty's mind blowers material. He's erased his memory for a lot less. He made Morty forget when he said taken for granted. Morty says that they're not his family, just a bunch of clones. Rick says that a clone is just as good if it has all the same memories. Never mind that it's a different personality. He wouldn't think this. Rick says that Morty's original family wasn't going to let him just live his life. They wanted the old Rick back, and it was super off-putting. Never mind that the clone Rick is supposed to be a genius, not stupid enough to tell them that he's a clone who killed Rick. So he wouldn't need to do this. He says that he replaced his family and is fine with that. I don't buy that Rick would do that to Beth. A Rick and Beth's body wouldn't act like Beth, so he'd miss her. This story would only be forgivable if it was explained to be all just a dream, but the writer doesn't have the talent to do that. Instead, they're a complete amateur. Morty grabs the portal gun, saying that he doesn't buy for a second that it doesn't matter who we are, and if Rick believed it, he wouldn't care. He shoots Rick with the portal gun, which destroys him as he inexplicably says his catchphrase. How is Morty alive anyways? He warps to the show's Earth, and immediately Rick blasts him to death, with Morty asking what that was. This must be before he found out there were Mortys other than him around. This must be a prequel to a lot of the episodes in the show. Rick says that's one of its clones probably, or a Morty looking to take over his life. To be fair, maybe that Morty was planning on doing that, because there's no other place he could fill than a Morty's place. He'd have no other house that would accept him right away than a Morty's house. But I think that would be uncharacteristically evil of him to do. Rick shouldn't have assumed he'd want to do that. He could have easily just helped him find a dimension where there isn't a Morty. Or at least brought him to the Citadel of Ricks. Instead of talking to him and asking what was going on, he just killed him immediately. In a rushed way for the writer to wrap up the comic taking place in a different universe from the show. Which turned out to be a terrible decision because the final issue of the comic, spoiler alert, ends with the biggest downer ending you could possibly imagine. Yes, worse than this. So that can't be accepted as canon to the show, or that'd be the worst finale ever. This immediate shoot-to-kill mentality is even contradicted in an earlier issue. In the Ugly Morty arc, when alternate Morty warps to Rick and Morty through a portal, he doesn't immediately get killed. He actually brought him to a bed and found out what he was coming to him for help with. And I know that was C-137 Rick because he said that the Council of Ricks were a bunch of idiots. And only one Rick had been established to hate the Council. The show's Rick was defined as always being the rogue one who doesn't like the Council, and so he was the first one suspected of wrongdoing, because he was the only one like that. This panel has Rick calling other Mortys worse than cockroaches, and Morty's got no compassion for other Mortys at all, like that Ugly Morty arc never happened, and he says that he'd never be comfortable with other hymns. Meanwhile, both of the Pocket Morty stories have Morty in a yellow shirt caring about other hymns, and even wanting freedom for them. And the same goes for Morty in the Evil Morty episode. This has gotta be the worst written story in the comic. This is written as badly as a terrible Sonic story. And I'd know. With no foreshadowing at all, it turns out that Comic Rick switched the brains of main characters and made them forget about it because he was somehow incapable of switching them back, which we know is bullshit from even the show. None of this could ever happen in the show. It's just arbitrary. This story isn't canon to me. It acts like a previous story arc in the comic didn't happen. So it literally isn't canon. Even this very issue makes use of the fact that he has backup clones he wakes up as. So he could clearly apply that technology towards returning his family to their normal bodies. No, he switched their brains to make a point about how identity is an illusion. But why? What did he have to gain from any of this? He even said at one point that he wouldn't do some evil deed because how would that profit me? How did the clone Ricks expect the real Rick to never come back and inevitably kill one of them? Well, I guess they naturally don't know that Rick can wake up in a different universe as a clone Rick he didn't even make. Still, we should have seen the story conclusively end the comic universe, with Comic Rick inevitably returning and killing the Rick who replaced them, and then effortlessly returning his family to their normal bodies, using the clone Ricks who probably switched minds with them. Too bad he never get his Morty back, but we could see him use spare parts instead, and then erase his memory of the fact that this isn't the real Morty. There was no hint that spare parts died. By not seeing this, oh yeah, he could have just gotten Morty back to his original body by switching his mind with spare parts. By not seeing this wasn't a proper end to the comic dimension, and completely misses the narrative point of why it was a separate dimension. Because it's a comic book. Why on earth does the writer care enough to do this? The comic is episodic anyways. It's not like it's so bogged down by continuity. I'm sure most of the stories could have taken place in the show just fine. I really want to know why the clone Ricks got free of their tubes. Someone would have to let them out on purpose. Rick would have a backup generator for the clones, even if the power went out. So since we didn't see a giant EMP wave go off, that doesn't make any sense at all. That's just a diabolus ex machina, combined with a Rick uncharacteristically switching Beth with a clone Rick, to scare Morty into traveling to another universe after turning him into a portal. He should have known Morty would turn on him. This is the biggest villain ball that Rick has ever been given. And then it's immediately followed up with by another one. The show Rick uncharacteristically kills comic Morty the minute he shows up, when he could have easily talked with him and sent him to a world without a Morty. Like, oh, I don't know, the one where Summer doesn't have a Morty? This is such obvious meta logic. Like, the only explanation I can possibly think of for this, because it doesn't make any logical sense, is that it was obviously only written because this particular writer somehow didn't like that the comic Rick and Morty weren't the show ones. Talk about something that doesn't matter. Even though obviously the comic's never going to be canon to the show because they know it'd be bad marketing to confuse the people who only watch the show by going off comic continuity. So what is the point of saying it's the show's Rick and Morty when the comic will always be its own separate canon ignored by the show? This just gave me Ian Flynn flashbacks. He suddenly made the Architonic comic just like the games, as if he wanted to be canon to the games and vice versa, when it was never meant to be that way and never will be, all because the games are the most well-known continuity. Anyways, the point is, Rick would never do the things he did in this story. This story isn't canon to me. I've been making a collage with a snipping tool, gathering a picture of basically every time that Rick has been nicer to Morty than he has to be. And granted, sometimes it shows the Rick that's not of this dimension, but still. I've gone over 40 pictures. There's plenty of times when he shows that he cares about Morty. There's no reason he would do this to him.